So welcome to episode 4 on water. Now this is a fascinating episode because I actually had people tell me, I did a couple of webinars last week and people told me they bought this whole series last time because they wanted this episode. So that was interesting to me. It features Professor Gerald Pollack and he introduces us to what to me was a completely new kind of water. He calls it fourth phase water. And I think it's going to blow you away when you see it. So water is coming up.
Yeah, I think that this is one of the more interesting episodes. And like I said, originally when you showed this to me, I thought it was incredibly impactful, and it changed. It changed the way that I look at the water that I put in my body. Even filtered water, even down to some of the micronutrients. It actually is very interesting too, because one of the things that I've run across in the past is that we're also filtering our water to the point that it has no nutrient value anymore. Yeah. So trace minerals in your water is certainly a thing, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this one. So I can't wait for you to see what's in store.
Absolutely. Episode 4, water. Enjoy.
Water is the single most important nutrient that we consume. We cannot live without it for more than 2 or 3 days. We can live without food for a week or more.
It shouldn't have chlorine in it. It shouldn't have fluoride in it. It shouldn't have anything in it at all except for the water.
As we move towards the year 2050 and we're dealing with 9 billion or so people on the planet, producing high quality drinking water for the globe is becoming increasingly challenging.
Here in Ireland we get plenty of rain most of the time, and I've always thought that Irish water is about the best tasting in the world. Apart from using a water filter, I suppose I've been inclined to take water for granted all my life. But one of the interviews I've done for this episode has completely amazed me and changed forever my understanding of water. In a few moments you'll see that interview with a man who's turned our understanding of cell biology on its head and who's actually discovered a completely new kind of water hiding in plain sight all along. But first, a reminder of how difficult it can be to get pure water.
It's about real food, it's about real water uncontaminated with fluoride. That's the other thing that's going on in many countries like America and Australia.
The way in which we deal with this is obviously through our water treatment systems. And of course, amongst these is the use of a wide range of components, of which chlorine is probably still the most important.
I love Australia because Australia has, in my view, some of the most beautiful girls in the world until they smile at you. And when you look at their teeth, it's got this chalky white mottling on the teeth. They are expecting 15% of their school kids to have dental fluorosis poisoning as a result of putting this junk that they get out of the aluminium and phosphate industry into the water supply. And you go, well, why are they putting it in the water supply? The answer, well, they're saying it's going to stop your dental cavities. Well, if you don't want dental cavities, stop eating sugar.
The provisional, 10 parts per billion set by the WHO and the EPA here in the States is 300 times more cancer risk allowing than any other carcinogen.
One of the issues we're seeing is that the use of chlorine in our municipal water supplies does have a range of side effects, and we have a system out there. Public health does not want to draw attention to issues with municipal drinking water because there is no real alternative. Yes, those with adequate money can can buy bottled water. Those who have access to fresh water supplies or spring or mineral waters can do that as well. Others may be able to put expensive water filters into their house.
I've just taken delivery of this. And if I believe what some people are saying about this and similar devices, it's going to give a huge boost to my health. Celebrities swear by the system. A lot of people in the health world are using it. And it's been popular in Japan for the past decade or so. So what does it do? Well, it not only filters my water, but it adds extra hydrogen. So more on this in a moment, but first to gel water. And so to Seattle and a science lesson, but one of the most fascinating science lessons I've ever had. I'd imagined we knew all there was to know about water, but for years Dr. Gerald Pollack was convinced there was more to be discovered. He's developed a new science of water with some potential life-changing implications. Tell me what you've been doing now for 10 or 15 years and this new science of water that sounds intriguing that you have developed.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're certainly intrigued. Well, we found something new about water that I think answers a lot of questions, including what keeps the clouds up in the sky. And what we found is that, contrary to what we are all taught, that water has three phases, we now found the fourth phase. So we learned that water has three phases. You know, it's got a solid phase, it's ice, got a liquid phase that we drink, and it's got a vapor phase that constitutes the vapor that fills the atmosphere. Well, long ago, more than 100 years ago, some physical chemists said something is wrong here. There must be a fourth phase of water, not just three, because we simply can't explain all the properties of water unless there is some kind of water that is in between a solid and a liquid, kind of might have an ordered molecular structure and behaves as a kind of gel or something like that. The consistency maybe of raw egg white or something like this. And over the years, people have maintained an interest in some kind of ordered phase of water, if you will, and that's exactly what we found. We found it almost by chance about 12 years ago, and making some observations in the laboratory. We found that if we put a substance in a bath of water, some material, a so-called hydrophilic material, which means water-loving. It means that if you have a surface and you drop the water, it spreads out because the surface loves the water. It wants to get as much of that water as possible, hydrophilic. So we put a surface or a substance in the water, and we found that that right next to the surface of that substance, it was actually a gel, and next to the surface, if we put particles in the water, those particles were excluded from a giant region right next to the surface. And in further experiments, we quickly immerse the gel in the water containing the particles, and we could see with the microscope this particle-free region that keeps growing, and it grows to a very substantial amount of fractions of a millimeter, which you can even see with your naked eye. And so someone said, you know, you should maybe give this a name, and the Australian colleague was right. We gave it a name. We called it the exclusion zone for obvious reasons. It just excludes, and it's easy because exclusion zone, EZ, right? We called it easy water, and it's easy to remember. So the title stuck. It stuck, I'm sorry, and maybe it's struck too, but it stuck. And so a lot of people refer to it as the EZ or the fourth phase. When we study this region of water, we find that every single physical chemical feature differs from ordinary water.
So what exactly is this new type of water?
This is the kind of water that actually fills your cells. It fills your body. See, everyone knows that our bodies are filled with water. 2/3 is the usual amount that's quoted, but but it depends how old you are. When you're born, you're roughly 90% water, and when you've got as little hair as I have, it's down to maybe 60% water. And if you translate that volume fraction into fraction of molecules, it's shocking, because if you line up all the molecules in your body and you start counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, more than 99 out of 100 are water molecules. Because they're so small, to make up that 2/3, you need a lot of water molecules. So most scientists dealing with health and cell biology and such, they make the presumption that these water molecules, 99 out of every 100 molecules in your body, don't really do a whole lot. They just sit there and bathe most of the important molecules that we know of, like proteins and DNA and RNA. But in fact, many people now have come to understand that water is absolutely central to everything that goes on. And the water that's in our bodies is not mostly H2O, the stuff that we drink. It's actually this fourth phase water. We know that because this water is interfacial. It grows at surfaces. I mentioned before, hydrophilic surfaces. And the cell is just absolutely packed so densely with those kinds of surfaces. So most of the water inside your cells, and in fact outside, it's mostly easy or fourth phase water.
So forgive my ignorance of all this, but I'm drinking a glass of water that we all know and love. Does my body then convert that into EZ, as we say in our part of the world, so EZ doesn't work so well. Does my body convert that into easy water?
Yes, it does. And that's one way of getting this EZ or EZ water. And the way it does that, so we found through experiments, you need energy to build order. This is commonly known among physicists and chemists. A good example of that is your messy room. It's easy every time you come into the room to misplace this and misplace that, and then one day you come and look and say, this is disgusting, I have to do something about it. But doing something requires work. You have to put a few hours into organizing and creating order. And that principle applies throughout chemistry and physics. So to create this kind of water, you drink the water and somehow it gets converted into EZ water. How does it happen? We found the agent is light. And I use light in the broad sense. When we think of light, we think of visible light running through the ordinary visible spectrum. But when physicists think of it, they think of all the wavelengths of light, ranging not only the ultraviolet and infrared, but throughout an entire spectrum, which extends hugely. And each one is a different wavelength. And we found that in testing this, we found that infrared wavelengths are the ones that build this kind of water. Now, infrared, most of us equate infrared with heat. So you have a heat lamp and it's generating infrared. And this is the kind of energy that builds this water. But infrared is all around us. A lot of people don't really understand. They know that if you look at the electric range and you see the coils glowing bright orange, it's generating heat, and it's generating infrared energy, or infrared light, the physicists would call it. That's infrared. But in fact, infrared is all over the place. You can't get rid of it. If you were to turn off all the lights in a room and make it pitch black, so that even when you're dark adapted, you can see nothing. And then you whip out your infrared camera, which, unlike ordinary cameras, is sensitive to infrared wavelengths and not the visible wavelengths. You get a perfect image of everything. And I know that soldiers like to use this at nighttime to see targets. So the infrared energy is simply all over, and that's why we like to call it free energy. It's literally free. You don't have to pay a nickel for it. It's there all the time. And this is the kind of energy that builds this EZ water. You really need this kind of water. You see, this is the water that fills your cells, and the reason you need it is that the work of the cell is done by the proteins inside the cell. So, for example, if you're a muscle cell, The proteins in the muscle maybe undergo a change from this kind of shape to this kind of shape. They fold, so to speak. The biochemists would call it folding. But the normal environment of these proteins is that they're surrounded by EZ or EZ water, fourth phase water, and then they do their thing. But if you're short of this kind of water, if you're deficient, which means you're dehydrated, if you don't have, the protein is not in its natural environment and can't figure out what to do. See, so the protein may be flailing around and not able to do this kind of action to cause your muscle to contract. And so you need, that's just one of many examples, you need this water inside your cell. And if you're slightly deficient, then the particular cell or organ is not working up to par, you see. And if you can restore this easy water, it will return. And of course, there are more extreme examples of pathologies where the organ is just not functioning, like a kidney disease or liver or something. And the idea is that if you can restore this easy water into your cell, the pathology could conceivably even reverse. I've seen some examples of drinking kinds of waters after which pathologies do reverse. And so that's the background material that for any of us to work up to par, our cells need to be filled with easy water. And so one way to achieve that, of course, is drinking water, because you need the raw material to build the easy water. Our bodies build it because we receive infrared energy not only from outside, from all over, but from inside, because all of those metabolic reactions are generating heat. Heat is equivalent to infrared. It's what we need to build the easy water.
Paul Baratiero started his first business in high school. In his 20s, he was selling 3,000 different medical products to places like nursing homes. Paul's also a naturopathic doctor and founder of Synergy Science, whose products include a new hydrogen water system, which users credit with some dramatic health benefits.
Hydrogen, first and foremost, we need to understand that the reason why hydrogen is it reduces oxidative stress and inflammation. Those are accepted as the leading cause of all disease, no matter what it is. There are over 700 studies so far showing the therapeutic effects on 170 human disease models. The reason there's so many is because they're all caused by oxidative stress. And one of the many roles that hydrogen has in the body is reducing oxidative stress and inflammation. But to really understand hydrogen's role in the body, we have to take a step back and ask ourselves, is hydrogen supposed to be in the body? In other words, I created a system that dissolves molecular hydrogen in water for those that have gut damage, for those that have oxidative stress and inflammation and other neurologic issues, because it's very beneficial for them. But let's ask the question, why? Why is it beneficial, and why do they have oxidative stress? Why is there gut damage in this world? Where I think we know there's gut damage because of pesticides, antibiotics, metals, diet, all kinds of issues that are rampant chemicals in our society worldwide. This isn't just one or two countries. This is in the world. So we have damage being done to the gut or the intestinal tract, destroying the microbiome that we have. In that microbiome is bacteria. And those bacteria have an extremely critical role in the body, not just to digest food, but 70 to 80% of our immune system is housed in the gut. So if you have gut dysfunction or you destroy the gut through an antibiotic and pesticides and heavy metals and what have you, you are now susceptible because you've destroyed 70 to 80% of your immune system. So if we say gut damage is the problem and we say hydrogen can fix that problem, why is that, right? That seemingly doesn't make sense. Well, the gut is a hydrogen generator. That's what we need to understand. If the right bacteria is in the gut and we're eating foods that are broken down into short chain fatty acids, medium chain fatty acids, or into fiber, fiber-rich foods, water-soluble fiber, like vegetables and things like this, amazing. The bacteria in the gut can break them down into hydrogen gas, and that's what flatulence is, right? You have hydrogen, methane, some sulfur, different gases that are in our flatulence. One of the roles of hydrogen is to go through the intestinal tract into our body and what we call signal other pathways to function, what we call signal modulation. So yes, hydrogen on direct contact with things like hydroxyl radicals, which is the most cell damaging free radical in the body that's created in the mitochondrial respiratory chain in producing energy. The reality is, yes, one-on-one, we can take one H2 molecule, molecular hydrogen molecule, and it can combine with two hydroxyl radicals, and the result will be two water molecules. So imagine, it's a beautiful story. You're taking the worst free radical or the most cell damaging or cytotoxic radical in the body, combining it with hydrogen and creating a water molecule instead of a horrible cell damaging radical. It's a beautiful story. And while that's true, what we really believe is through catalase, upregulation, hydrogen gas in the body, it really signals the mitochondrial function to not produce as many hydroxyl radicals. That makes far more sense, because otherwise you'd have to keep on putting hydrogen in the body constantly. But it makes far more sense where hydrogen being in the body programs or signal modulation for many different systems to function the way they're supposed to function. So destroying the gut removes that hydrogen and the signal modulation that's giving direction to the cells of the body. Putting hydrogen back into the system restores all of our natural antioxidant functions. When we look at oxidative stress, we have to understand the difference of oxidation and oxidative stress. Oxidation is normal and natural. This is necessary to life. But when oxidation gets too high or outside of a normal range, we call that oxidative stress, and that causes inflammation and disease. And that's accepted. This is not a new concept. If we Google leading cause of disease, you're going to see oxidative stress and inflammation as the accepted cause. So hydrogen literally reduces oxidation or oxidative stress and inflammation, and we have studies showing this. And so it's really a cause and effect. You put hydrogen in the body, you lower oxidative stress and inflammation, and therefore you lower your susceptibility or the occurrence of disease and pathology. So in a simple mechanism, that's what it's really about. Now, hydrogen can go into neurologic issues because it depends on what method of administration you put hydrogen into the body. If we inhale it, right, breathe it in, then it's very active in the blood and in the brain. But if you dissolve it in water, like I developed the machine, the Echo brand of machines that not only filter but then dissolve the hydrogen in water, when the hydrogen gets into the stomach, it stimulates ghrelin secretions, which is the hunger hormone. But really the benefit of ghrelin is for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, neurologic issues, and cancer, because it goes to the brain and stimulates cognitive function. So, we can get neurologic benefits, we get gut benefits, we get many, many different benefits from hydrogen that truly touch our entire body. When we think about over 200 biomolecules in the body that are regulated by hydrogen gas, you have touched every system in the entire human body. And when we talk about regulating, upregulation or downregulation, depending on what's needed, or nothing if nothing is needed, that's what's so beautiful about hydrogen versus other types of antioxidants where they're going to do what they do regardless if you need it. Hydrogen won't. So I hope that answers your question.
Hydrogen is the first element on the periodic table of elements. It's the lightest, smallest, and it can go everywhere and anywhere. But what is it functionally in the body? Of course, H2O, 2 hydrogen, and oxygen make up the water. Through an electrolytic process, you can actually reduce the water and reveal the hydrogen to the body in a bioavailable, if you will, form. And what it does is quite fantastic because it is considered the ultimate antioxidant in that it can take apart, if you will, or let's say put back together that which is very damaging to the cell, these things known as hydroxyl radicals, the OH. And by having the hydrogen available to that in the cell, they can combine and convert from a dangerous substance to a harmless water that is floated out of the body. So it's a beautiful starting point to engage what we know of normal metabolic processes of excretion, of dealing with metabolic waste, things that would be inflammatory if left in the cells unchecked. And hydrogen via water can be released and made accessible to the cells deep in the body, anywhere in the body, and in that way reduce a lot of the oxidative stress or damage or inflammatory cascades that many people are stuck in. So hydration is critical for all of us, yet we don't realize how much we rely upon hydrogen as an element because most people are not on a clean, organic, raw food type diet. Very little bit of their diet is made up of that. The fiber that is found in raw vegetation, for instance, in a healthy gut microbiome would feed the bacteria in such a way that that bacteria interacting with that whole unprocessed raw organic food would produce copious amounts of hydrogen made available to the rest of the body and cells. So we have to heal the body and get people back to a state where they can actually do that from their food. We can't wait for that. We all need to drink water. So if we can release the hydrogen from the water, we can facilitate powerful, optimal metabolic function restoration, and then continue to work to heal the gut so that it can do what it's designed to do in interacting with real food. But the water is a key way to get there right away, immediately.
The latest study that was just done on colon cancer was done by the manufacturer of 5-fluorouracil, which is the chemotherapy drug for colon cancer. And what they wanted to see is what happens when you mix hydrogen into that IV therapy drug, 5-fluorouracil. So the result was hydrogen positively affected apoptosis, cell apoptosis. So for those that don't understand apoptosis is if a cell is multiplying inappropriately, then they will blow up, effectively self-destruct. That's what apoptosis is. Somehow, when the cancer takes over a normal cell from a mitochondrial function, that process is stopped. So there is some modulation going on or some direction given to that cell. No, you're not supposed to explode or self-destruct. We need to duplicate you. Somehow hydrogen restores apoptosis or enhances apoptosis. And so what the study showed is that hydrogen water had a strong anti-cancer activity in the body. Also 5-fluorouracil did, but only when the both of them were combined did you have 100% cell death, cancer cell death. So here you have science wanting to use hydrogen along with an IV therapy drug to accomplish 100% cell death. So I would answer that question by saying the foundational study that was done on hydrogen was in 2007, published in 2008 by Nature Medicine. Dr. Shige Ota in Japan published this study showing that hydrogen was a selective antioxidant, only reacting with cytotoxic or cell-damaging radicals, but had no role or no effect on reactive oxygen species, for instance, that had a physiological role. So free radicals that were good, hydrogen didn't do anything with. Those that were bad, it reacted with to turn them into something else. So that was a huge study in 2007, 2008. It typically takes 10 years for a foundational study like that to get to be to the American public's knowledge. It's 10 years. So here we are 10 years later, and people are starting to hear about it now. But what's interesting with hydrogen is you have 700 studies now in the last 10 years that have been done with hospitals, scientists, and everything else that are showing every possible disease and malfunction in the body that hydrogen is helping with. And so in my view, from what it was 15 years ago when I started this journey, it is greatly accepted. And there's not a single doctor that I've ever talked to that is dispelling the fact that hydrogen is an antioxidant or the hydrogen has benefits. It hasn't gotten to the public's view yet in full, but I see it increasing rapidly in the public's view.
I've used an inhaler since I was a child, or had used since I was a child. I had asthma. And I was at a conference and I met this guy who's selling hydrogen water. And so I drank about a 2-ounce cup, I think. And I noticed my chest expanded and my thoracic vertebra started popping. So as a chiropractor, that's a pretty significant event. I noticed my breathing improved. I had another glass of water, and from that day I have not used an inhaler. I did buy the machine. I've continued to use hydrogen water for 4 years. But
What about anybody else in your family? Has anybody else tried it with any beneficial effects or anything like that?
well, I've had several patients, many patients actually, that have noticed huge effects with hydrogen water, lowered their blood pressure, their blood sugar. My dogs won't drink. If I give my dogs tap water and hydrogen water, they go for the hydrogen water. So they can tell a difference.
The technology to produce hydrogen water has been around for many decades. In Asia, they have these machines that are utilized, and they're considered medicinal, if you will. The machines are medical devices. But much of the hype surrounding this type of water has been focused on alkalinity, the ability to change the pH, to split the stream so you have an alkaline stream and an acid stream. But the reality is the benefit was not due to its pH, but due to the hydrogen that would be released in typically the alkaline stream. Now we can produce that water in a pH neutral form, so we don't have to split and waste the water that you can't use. So in this way, the hydrogen has been known, and there are hundreds of scientific articles, peer-reviewed articles on animal and human models in terms of disease processes in the body that can be corrected by introduction of hydrogen in a bioavailable form.
Over the past couple of years, as I've been talking to more and more nutrition professionals in a variety of ways, whether their focus is exercise or supplements or diet, every one of them says we all need to take responsibility to drink more water to make sure we remain hydrated. So how can we expedite the transfer of the water that we drink to easy water? Are there things we can do that help?
Yeah, there are. Back in history, from the Ayurvedic culture and on, there are certain substances that are known from generation to generation to be good for health. And we did some experiments, and their experiments are ongoing to see what's going on. So our hypothesis, central hypothesis, is the key to get good health is to maintain hydration of the cell, or to maintain easy water. And we asked the question, do these substances build easy water? You see, because if they do, then we have a good understanding of why these substances are really good for health. And so we've tried a half dozen. We did probiotics, and we found probiotics increases the amount of EZ. We tried Tulsi, coming from basil. We tried coconut water. Does the same thing, builds EZ. We tried aspirin. You know, aspirin is one of those, it's natural, right? It comes from the bark of the willow tree. And it has so many positive effects, right? Ranging from reducing fever, reducing swelling, reducing pain, thinning the blood so it doesn't clot so easily. It's good for, I saw reports about breast cancer, amazing effects on reducing mortality from breast cancer, good for your heart, etc. So the question is, how on earth could aspirin, a simple substance, have so many positive effects? And hypothesis that came up is very simple. Well, it's just increasing the amount of EZ water wherever you need it, you see. And we did the experiments, and we found, indeed, that was exactly the case. And, you know, as a control, you look at substances that are not good for our health, and you might expect that they're going to decrease the amount of EZ water. Exactly what we found. We tried, for example, glyphosate, which is the main component of Roundup, weed killer, said to be innocuous for humans, but You know, there's a lot of controversy about that. We found absolutely it diminishes the amount of easy water.
How does an anthropologist come to be something of an expert in water?
Well, I was looking at food strategies all over the world. That's what I was really interested in. And I was surprised in desert communities that the obvious issue that really was on the table was hydration. So I started looking at around the globe, how do people in desert communities hydrate themselves without 8 glasses of water a day? Why were they surviving? And I came to some very surprising research, which is that they were actually using plants to hydrate, which is a very smart strategy. And as I began to look more into this, I found out that's what the medievals were doing. Many different time zones and cultures around the world, they weren't going out and using water from wells. They were using plant material to basically soups and stews and many ways to keep themselves well hydrated. So I'm really interested in why food is the nexus of hydration.
Okay, I have so many questions to ask you, but I'd like to start with you telling me what can go wrong when we're not properly hydrated?
I'll be very brief. Even a 2% reduction in hydration leads to measurable cognitive loss. So the first thing that goes is your judgment. After that, your muscles start to go down the tubes, but we can see that with the elderly very easily. And they have special problems around dehydration because hydration is held in your muscle tissue, and they lose muscle, and their reflexes go for knowing when they're thirsty, so they're very vulnerable. And I care about that story a great deal because my interest in hydration really came at the nexus of this research and having an elderly mother in a nursing home who was suffering from chronic dehydration. And I was like, I'm going to solve this. I'm going to solve this.
So what do we need to be doing? When do we need to start doing it? How can we get our heads around what's the best way to hydrate ourselves with a view to having a happy, healthy, long life?
Well, the relationship between hydration and longevity is very simple. And by molecular count, that means if you count up all the molecules in our body, 99 of them are going to be water molecules. So the quickest intervention and the most potent form of maintaining our health starts with hydration. And that makes sense when you understand the molecular structure. It also makes sense when you begin to realize that longevity traditions were very involved in movement. They move around a lot. They move all through the day. They're not out there running marathons. They're out there sitting, getting up, bending, working, walking, lifting. All just natural movement through the day turns out to be part of the hydration strategy and the longevity strategy because you're moving that water into your tissues. So it's coming from your intake, now being moved out and distributed to all your tissues. That's going to help your health. That's going to help your brain function. Very potent and accessible way to keep that longevity story going.
Now, what do I need to be doing? I genuinely feel guilty sometimes because I've seen all this advice that we need to be taking 6 or 8 glasses of water a day, and I struggle. I keep reminding myself I'll sip at water, but I get nowhere near that.
Well, I don't think we need 8 glasses of water a day, and I say that distinctly from my experiences with desert communities. And what we do need to be doing is having healthy food intake, food that hasn't been cooked or dried up. And that plant material especially, things like greens and fruits, all the fruits and vegetables, they come in at 80% water. Very important figure. So when we're eating well, we're hydrating well. And hydrating with this kind of plant material means we're getting the perfect package of nutrition and fiber and absorbability along with the hydration. But there's one other part of this that's very important, quite different. Regular water from a glass, where everyone's struggling to get that down. That's H2O. We need it. We need to partner with it. We need some of it in our life. But water from plant material has already been converted into H3O2. That water is distinctly different. It is much more absorbable. It has structure already that allows it to enter perfectly into our cells. So the hydration efficiency becomes much higher with less liquid intake. That's a really important piece of information. Do not have to drink as much if you're eating beautifully. And by that I mean fresh fruits and vegetables.
Not content with opening my eyes to easy water, Gerald Pollack had more brand new information for me when he started to talk about electricity.
It turns out that plants, just like us, that plants are basically built of cells, and cells are known to be negatively charged. People, including us, for many years, made measurements of the electrical potential inside of plants or plant cells, animal cells. They're all negatively charged. The potential differences on the order in animal cells like us, 80 or 90 millivolts negative, and in plants they're actually larger. So we are actually negatively charged. And nature tries hard to maintain that negative charge. Why is that? Well, the EZ water is negatively charged, and presumably this negatively charged, it comes from mostly from the EZ water. We're packed with this kind of negatively charged water. And we try our darndest to get rid of the positive charges, to keep ourselves most negative. And the way we do this is through every orifice in our body. Just think about it. The first thing is you breathe in air and then you exhale. So what do you exhale? Well, yeah, so it contains carbon dioxide and water vapor, right? And the two put together give you carbonic acid protons. So we're breathing out positive protons all the time. We try hard to get rid of that to maintain our negativity. When you sweat, the sweat has low pH, which is full of protons. So it's your body's attempt to get rid of those positive charges so that they don't neutralize the negatives. And when you go to the toilet and you pee, it's low pH, full of protons, so you're getting rid of. And the story of a friend of mine who was measuring his body's electrical potential, and he went and he took a dump, and he found that he got rid of positive charge that way. He became more negative immediately afterwards. So this is not a scientific explanation, but it seems that Mother Nature has conspired to figure out all ways possible for us to get rid of those nasty positives and keep our negativity. We need that negativity because the negativity is a manifestation of the EZ water. So nature really wants us to keep that EZ water at a maximum. You have to kind of remember about oxidation and reduction. Reduction is the gain of electrons. Oxidation is the loss of electrons. So we don't want to lose those electrons, right? We want to keep them because the negative charge is really important for us. And so oxidation would remove them, but an antioxidant would keep them because it's working oppositely. And I think that's the reason why the antioxidants work, because they actually serve to maintain this EZ water.
And hearing you talk online about how we feel after walking along the beach in our bare feet, that made sense to me for the first time.
Well, when I first heard some of the underlying premise, you could have knocked me over with a feather. So I started my career in electrical engineering, and I thought I knew something about electricity. And one day, there was a Russian fellow. He worked in my lab for 6 months, and he was about to fly off that evening back to Russia. And we had a final conversation. He was telling me about the negative charge of the Earth. And I said to him, Andre, you're crazy. I studied electrical engineering, and if the Earth is negatively charged, if I plug into the receptacle in the wall and I'm plugging into negative charge instead of zero, is impossible, because I mean, my professors would have told me all this, and I would have known it. Everybody knows when you plug in, it's zero, it's not negative. And I said, you're crazy, Andre. He says, you're crazy, because in Russia, every middle school student knows that the Earth has a net negative charge. So I went home with a headache, and next day, one of my students came to me with the famous lectures of the Nobel laureate Richard Feynman, the lectures that are read by practically every graduate student in physics. And he showed me Volume 2, Chapter 9, and there it was, about the net negative charge of the Earth. So So the Earth is not neutral, it's negatively charged, and we need that negative charge. And so if you take a walk on the beach, take off your shoes, walk barefoot, what you're doing is you're connecting your body to a vast repository of negative charge. And so you can then suck up this negative charge. The negative charge builds the easy water. And there you go. So the reason you feel good, I think, or a possible reason for feeling good, is that you're filling your body with negative charge, including your brain.
Okay, so that was our water episode. You're going to have learned something new there for sure. If you didn't learn something new there, you should be in these episodes, not watching it. Jared Pollock was a fascinating interview for us. But so was Robert Scott Bell, because the whole hydrogen thing I found fascinating. And my journey, actually, Timmy, I explained this again last week to some people, but it went from using a simple carbon filter to a more advanced filter to the hydrogen, and it actually has changed my life in many ways.
It's amazing. It's amazing, and it's not something that I would ever have considered before.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I find fascinating. When we do these documentary series, the evolution, I've been involved in so many of them, the evolution of science and technology and human health is moving so quickly that these new discoveries, I mean, I realize that there have been a lot of docuseries, but we continue to discover brand new things.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I want to remind everyone, this entire series is designed now as a step-by-step towards something that you can actually implement in your life. The 21-day Health Accelerator program that we will have available for you at the end. And it's going to give you steps. So you're getting the information now that will prime you and make you ready so that the process that you then go through is going to be a lot more simple. You're going to have actionable items to be able to go through and change your water and change your nutrition, but and change it in ways that will have a positive impact no matter who you are. So all right, so we're at the end of this episode, so tell them what's next, because it's a very important episode coming up next.
Yes, it is, and it's something that's been covered a lot in some ways
also true
by docuseries, which
Absolutely.
is cancer.
Yep.
But it's covered a lot for a reason.
Of
because,
course.
like you again were telling me last night, I think it's 1 in 3 women, 1 in 2 men, or vice versa, but something like that.
It is 1 in 3 women, 1 in 2 men at this point in time will get cancer in their lifetime. And the other thing, though, about cancer, in my opinion, that's very important is everyone has been impacted in some way. My mother died from breast cancer recurrence. All right. I only got to know my birth mother for 9 years, and the reason that we got to meet in the first place, the reason we got to meet in the first place is frankly because she had breast cancer and she had a double mastectomy, and she realized that I was out there in the world and would never know my genetic background without us meeting one another. I would not trade those 9 years for anything in the world, but it made me very aware of the impact of cancer in people's lives.
Right, I'm sure it did.
Yep.
So listen, join us tomorrow. We're going to have a lot of stories, actually, of people like that who've gone through it, who've suffered from it. And I think you'll find it not only interesting, but extremely inspiring. So join us for Cancer.